explode and bring the dead to life. A love so long to see a revolution somehow.
Welcome to Holy Prophets Radio, a business show that applies God's Word to your work, discussing business basics ranging from starting your own company to complex human resource challenges. Check out our complete schedule, archived shows, helpful downloads, and much more at holyprophetsradio.com. Now, get ready to be part of the revolution by applying biblical truths to your work with Holy Prophets Radio, hosted by me, Bradley Waldrop. Good morning and welcome to the show. We are going to be talking about some exciting things, and we have some new knobs and buttons and wires and everything else here in the studio today. So it's been a lot of fun to watch it go together. Over this last couple weeks, we've been concentrating on applying God's Word to your work, and last week we talked about work being a four-letter word, and we talked about the function of work and how we're made. If you missed that, please feel free to get online at holyprophetsradio.com and go to the archives. We are in the midst of putting up a number of shows into the podcast, into the YouTube channel as well. We are going to be having some really great guests coming up in the next few weeks. I just wanted to kind of give you a little preview of where we're really going to go. We've got a gentleman from the local area named Mel, who's going to be on our show, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to get your company connected to the local community and how to participate and develop relationships on a local level and be able to boost your business. We're going to talk a little bit about how ethics are so essential to organizations and how easy it is to make mistakes, and we're going to have a gentleman named Chuck Gallagher on in the next few weeks. Also, a couple different authors with some books out there on how they're applying God's Word to work and personal and business finances. It's really going to be a great series of shows coming up between now and the middle of October, so please stay tuned for all of that. You can get updates to the show on holyprophetsradio.com. You can also go to our Facebook page and like our Facebook page at facebook.com/holyprophets. We are on Twitter at Holy Prophets, and it's just been, there are lots of different ways to get a hold of us and participate with us. We have a really great show today. I had a chance to grow up in a family-owned business. So today, if you are in a family-owned business, if you own a family-owned business, if you are that family trying to figure it all out, if you're getting ready to buy one, heck, if you're in ministry right now, those are like family-owned businesses too. There's so many personal relationships that sort of get intertwined into the operation of the organization. Today's show is certainly going to be for you. If you have ever worked in a family-owned business, you probably understand a little bit of the dysfunction that exists in a family-owned business. The dysfunction exists because we tend to want to make things right by the family, and we sacrifice really great decisions for personal politics. And it's a very tricky thing. It's a very difficult to balance the family portion of the business and the business portion of the company. What we're going to talk about today is how to transition the leadership in those organizations. That is not easy. In fact, not very long ago, a friend of mine was lamenting that he has a family-owned business and Dad's still involved. He's trying to figure out how to get Dad out of the company and do it politically correct, in lots of love with Dad, to say, your time here has been great. Please let me take it and do something different with the company than where we've been. Let me take the good foundation you have given me and make it better. That's a very hard thing. I get that. In fact, I used to work for a family-owned business, and let me just give you kind of a background here real quick. I grew up in family-owned businesses. My parents owned a business in a partnership, and we worked as kids in the store. And then later on, a number of years later, my father owned a franchise, and we grew up in that environment. And my first professional job was working for an engineering firm that was owned by a family. The second one was owned by a family. The third one, fourth one, and fifth one were owned by families. the family-owned business dynamic is really unique, but it's very popular. In the United States, we have an awful lot of businesses that are owned by families. And the reason I say that if you're in ministry, it's like a family-owned business too. If it's like ministry just sort of permeates every part of who you are, and what happens at home also carries over into the ministry. And so it's really important to understand those family dynamics. When we try to transition an organization leadership, the leadership of an organization in a family-owned business, we are challenged. And part of that challenge is, do we do what is traditional, and that is to give the business to the oldest child, to the individual who seems to be hanging out at the company more often, or do we do something completely and totally different? That's very, very difficult to understand. When I worked in a professional organization's family-owned business, here's sort of what the process looked like. We wanted to figure out how to get the right person in, and we had to look at qualifications. And when we look at qualifications, we want to be able to understand, how to set those up that someone can come into the company and do well. When we decide to go try to find somebody, we have two options. We can either do an internal search or an external search. When you start an internal search, you actually start a little internal competition, and with that kind of competition, you end up with hurt feelings. You end up with the one-upsmanship. You end up with lots of chatter at the water cooler about who would do a better job. It's a real interesting dynamic. And the external search then all of a sudden breaches confidence in the organization, and those that are hanging out in the company looking for the tap on the shoulder and opportunity to take the next leadership role end up feeling really discouraged because you're looking outside. So there are lots of different dynamics with changing the leadership in an organization. And what I thought we could do was look at a really kind of fun story from the Bible. And we're going to look at Isaac, Rebekah, their two kids, Esau and Jacob, and try to understand, I don't know, what an example looks like of transferring ownership, transferring leadership in family. If those of you who are listening don't really remember who all these characters are, this is the story is in the book of Genesis. It's part of the Patriarch Era. The Patriarch Era is sort of the fathers of the faith in the Bible, and we have Abraham and Isaac. If you remember when we did the last Patriarch Era show, we talked about this Abraham and Isaac dilemma and challenging the leader of his own faith. So Isaac is the kid that was going to be sacrificed, and God saved him by providing another sacrifice. And I can't even imagine what life has got to be like growing up being Isaac, knowing that your dad had to take you to an altar and attempt to kill you in order to satisfy God's desire in Abraham's life and God's challenge to his dad. That can either shake your faith or strengthen your faith, one of the two. And it appears, if you read through the Bible in Genesis 25, right sort of middle of that chapter is where it starts. If you start to read, you start to realize that as this process actually strengthened Isaac's faith, and Isaac lived this life to try to please God, and he ended up getting married at a relatively old age, 40 years old, and he's marrying Rebekah, who happens to be his cousin. It's kind of interesting, but Isaac is one of those folks in an early part of the Bible that only had one wife. As far as my Bible study goes, has only had one wife, which is kind of unique then. And he was then trying. The future for the nation of Israel was to come through Isaac. That means that in 40 years old, he's trying to find a wife and have kids, and he finds that he's barren, or his wife is barren, and he goes to God. And the irony there for me is that he was born so much the same way. When Abraham couldn't have a child, all of a sudden, God said, "You're going to have a child," and he's up in his years, and his wife is barren as well, and they're frustrated, and they go to God and they ask for God to deliver a child. Well, Isaac has to do the same thing, which is really strange to me, but you know. What's so great about it is that he didn't have to wait nearly as long as Abraham, and he wasn't tempted to do something outside God's will and God's plan. So these Isaac and his wife Rebecca ended up having twins, and the twins were fighting in the womb. I don't know if any of you have brothers or sisters, but boy, I have a brother, and I remember what life looked like growing up. It wasn't always rainbows and lollipops. It was a lot of anger and frustration and competition. And I don't know if when I was that small, that competition was quite as dramatic as Esau and Jacob, but Esau and Jacob were in the womb, and this is who they were. They ended up growing up with a lot of animosity between the two of them. One was a shepherd, and the other was a hunter. Dad loved the hunter, but the personality of the shepherd was a lot like Dad, and Rebecca understood, going to God early on, understood that Jacob was supposed to really be the leader, and Jacob was the second one out of the womb, and so tradition would say that's all screwed up. And if you read, it actually is very bold and says that the older shall serve the younger, and the younger shall be stronger. And stronger in that particular context was not just physical strength. It was emotional strength, and it was in faith strength as well. This animosity between the two really sort of reached the head when Jacob sort of tricked his brother out of his birthright. And back then, birthright was a huge deal. Tradition said that when Dad died, the oldest son got twice as much as any of the other kids. So it was really a big deal, and Isaac was a rich individual, so there was a lot at stake. Lots of different character issues along the way, but what's so interesting to me in this story is that God's plan always trumps tradition. There were lots of traditional things in here that Isaac and Rebecca were trying to follow through with. They were trying to make sure that Esau was the heir, that he received his birthright. So much so that even after he gave up his birthright, that Isaac tried to give Esau the blessing of being the oldest child, and that was even kind of screwed up. In all of that, God found a way to make what he said to Rebekah come true. His promise to Rebekah, as far as the younger shall serve the older and be the stronger of the two, really kind of came through in all of that. And the confidence that I take from that is that no matter how badly we screw up, God can make it right within his own will, and he does not necessarily look at the traditions that we have constructed for ourselves. What's kind of the easiest way to say that? God can draw a straight line with a crooked stick. And that is really sort of what's happening in this particular story. What I think is important, though, is that if you look at that story, there are really sort of 4-5 key components that come out of that, and that is that God really does have a succession plan for every family, for every business, for every organization. He understands what that looks like, and it may not be traditional. God does explain the unexplainable. When the twins were in in Rebekah's womb, they were fighting, and Rebekah went to God to say, hey, what is going on here? And God revealed to her what the conflict was and why it was there. So God certainly can explain the unexplainable. And that God creates each one of us with a special purpose. Not that we end up comparing ourselves to one another. This person is better than that person. When you look at the description of what God was saying between the differences between Esau and Jacob, he wasn't saying that one was better than the other. He was saying that one actually suited the role of being the leader better than the other. That's not a a judgment on who they were as people. It was a judgment on where they fit in the organization. So what we're going to do is we're going to go for a break here, and then when we come back, we're going to apply this to your business and figure out how to transition the leadership in a family-owned business. Thanks.
WGNW 95.7, The Choice.
My God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like
Welcome back to Holy Prophets Radio. We are talking about the Patriarch Era and how to apply the lessons learned in the Patriarch Era in transferring leadership to family-owned businesses. Family-owned businesses have this really strange dynamic, and we're trying to figure out how to honor tradition in the family and do what's right for the business at the same time. And we were talking about, before we went on the break, we were talking about Jacob and Esau, the twin sons of Isaac, and the transfer of leadership there. It did not go the traditional way, and there were lots of different character challenges in all of that. And I'm not here to say one individual in that whole story has a better character than the other. What I am saying is that if you look at that story, one of the lessons that I learned out of all of that is that God's plan and His will always trump tradition. No matter how we see it, if we rely on what we're comfortable with, if we rely on what was done before, we're going to take an opportunity away from God sometimes to have Him deliver on His own will. So part of our challenge as we own businesses and we're trying to transfer the ownership of those businesses is to get it to the right person that's within God's will. One of the things that I failed to say before the break was that in all of this story, one of the other things that just sort of screams out at me is that no matter who the successor is in an organization, it will never be the predecessor. It's kind of hard to take in all at once, but if you understand what I'm trying to say is that, it's like delegating something. When you delegate, it's almost guaranteed that the person you delegate it to will not do it your way. Same thing happens in this transfer of ownership and transfer of leadership in family-owned businesses. If mom or dad own the company, the son, the daughter, or the best employee coming in as the new leader will never be that same person. The old leader leaves a mark on the organization, sets a foundation, establishes a culture, and the new person comes in and advances the agenda of the organization, might change the direction a little bit based on who they are and how they feel would be successful, but they're never going to be the original. And I think that's important because I have been in these companies where they did transfer the leadership, and what happens is you end up with animosity in the organization. You end up with bitterness in the organization because the new leader is not the old leader. And what I can tell you is get over it. I don't know how else to put that. They will, no matter how hard you want it, how hard you pray about it, how hard they try, they will never be the person that they're replacing. And oftentimes, the second leader in that transition ends up being the fall guy, so to speak, because everybody is angry about the patriarch in the organization leaving. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to apply this to your work, and that is to say, if you're a business owner, if you're a leader, if you're a ministry director, if you're a lead pastor, all of this stuff really applies. Know that the first thing is to know that God has your back and His plan will prevail, so get on board. The traditional approach to life needs to be examined as an opportunity and a possibility, but God's plan is really what you're after. Prayer and understanding by surrounding yourself by other godly people will really help get through this challenge, whether or not we're trying to transition leadership in the traditional way or we're going to transition leadership that's consistent with God's plan. Second is to ask God to explain the unexplainable. This happens to me all the time. I get a chance to work with companies and they're getting ready to transfer the leadership or the ownership of companies. And when they have the sort of quintessential golden boy in the organization. They have been grooming somebody for a long time. And that grooming takes a lot of time and energy, and boy, does it tax the emotions. Unfortunately, some of those individuals that are grooming didn't really understand what they were being groomed for. They also maybe have a new opportunity that looks to them to be better, and they leave. When they leave, the leadership that was pouring into them really takes that personally. And I'm here to say God can explain the unexplainable. So it's time to go back to God in prayer and ask Him what He's doing and why He's doing it. And I think that that will actually help take some of the bitterness out of this process. I used to know a guy that owned a company, and he worked with 3 different people to replace him. He got within 3 months of doing the transition, and every single person that he groomed for years left. He ended up selling the company, and it worked out in his favor. But he was really emotionally hurt because what he thought was his plan and the tradition in the organization just didn't work. So God can explain the unexplained or inexplicable. The other is, because God creates us all different for different roles, instead of starting to see the individuals in your own eyes, how they're going to help you, look at them at how God crafted them. What roles do they belong in? Is the traditional decision of bringing in the next heir in the company, does that fit within their skill set? Does that fit within who they are, how God made them? If not, then let it go. Relax about it and find somebody who does fit. Find a role that the traditional decision, maybe they fit in the organization somewhere else. Well, find that spot for them and let them play that role and not the role that you're trying to force them into. So understanding God creates us all in a completely different way. None of us are better, quote unquote, better than the other. We're just equipped different. We fit different in different places, and that's okay. We all have the temptation of sin, so we're on all on the even playing field when it comes to the bad side of us. Some of us give into sin more often than others, but hey, I'd be hypocritical if I told you that I wasn't a sinful guy, because I certainly am, and all of us are. So remember also that God challenges us to think beyond that tradition, and lastly, whoever you pick to be the successor in the organization, they're not going to be you. If you own the company, if you're the leader in a ministry and you're trying to find that next person, remember that who you pick is not you. They can't be you. In fact, they're going to be so different than you that sometimes that's going to really bother you. But they're crafted in a way that can help take your organization to the next level. If you are an employee, a team member, a volunteer in these companies, this can really cause a lot of anguish. Understand that God has this plan, and you might be thinking the traditional way, hey, look, I'm never going to be the next leader in the organization. I'm never going to be the next owner in this company. Well, remember that God doesn't do the traditional all the time, and His plan always trumps tradition. So there is hope there for you, and I would give you a little bit of advice, and that is to keep doing your job and do it well, so that your qualities can really shine. And if God so taps you on the shoulder, then you're ready, and you have the trust in the organization that you can actually deliver beyond that. There also, if you're one of these employees and you're really thinking that, hey, it's my time, I'm the guy, I'm the gal, I'm ready to go to this next step, and they decide something different than that, this is when we need to go to God to have Him explain the inexplicable. This is where we need to just say, hey, look, am I the best equipped for this? And if not, if I wasn't selected, I need to figure out how to have my heart softened in a way that I can help lead the organization, I can support the leadership in the organization, and I can be all right with it not being me. We're all created different. We all have different skill sets. Find the one place in the organization that fits you best, and let the anger and bitterness go that you weren't selected. And then Lastly, I can certainly say in the organization, this causes more grief than anything I can imagine, anything I've been exposed to, and that is when you do put the new leader in. Everybody in the organization is looking to the new leader to be able to do things that the original owner couldn't, and be the same person. We can't do that. We really have to look at the organization. We have to look at this particular person and understand where they want to take the company and get behind them, where they want to take the ministry and get behind them, so that we can go ahead and take and be part of the team, an effective part of the team that takes the company or the organization to the next level. So really understand, I mean, imagine what life would be like in this transition of an organization, if you're a family-owned business or a ministry, where you're really trying to advance the agenda of the company and challenge the traditional. Know that God's plan will always trump tradition. And that actually gives us a lot of relief and takes a lot of the stress out of the decision-making process of putting forward this new leader in the organization. So have faith that God's plan is going to do that. Free yourself up from the burden that you've got to make all the right decisions or play the political card as you are trying to make a political or a traditional decision. So let all of that go. And next week, we're going to talk about how to expand your influence in an organization, specifically talking about networking and how to develop personal relationships that really boost your business. We're going to have Mel Fergenbaum on next week, and we're going to talk about the Exodus era. The Exodus era is where the Israelites were leaving Egypt and they were going into brand new territory. They had to create these relationships. And so we're going to talk to Mel. If you have questions about the show, feel free to send me an email at bradley@holyprophetsradio. Or you can get on our Facebook page at facebook.com/holyprophets. You can visit our webpage at holyprophetsradio.com. May God richly bless you and your business. Have a great week.
He's living